Got it.
Yeah.
We are going to record this. Okay, take two. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar series. Today, we are going to hear from Fremont Unified, and the title of our webinar is Student Advocacy and District Action, Fremont's Emerging Educational Response to the Climate Emergency. So we have a team from Fremont here today. First, we're going to start by getting to know others in the webinar and making some connections, which is part of what we do as the Cali District Innovation Hub. We'll then get a chance to hear from our friends from Fremont. And toward the end of the webinar, we'll have time for some discussion, getting a chance to ask our Fremont presenters some questions. And at the very end, we love this part of our webinar series. We have some open time at 5 to 5:30 for people to join in conversations around key topics that interest you. And we have some topics already created, but we'll generate some additional ones if you would like. And that's a great time to just get in depth and get deeper on some of the things you've learned today. So with that, let's jump right in and start with our welcome and connections. If you look in the chat, and we'll keep adding this to the chat if new people join, we have a map of California that shows where a number of our participants come from. So if you have not already added your Padlet to the map of California, please show us where you're calling in from, and this will help us to know all of our where our impact is right now. And you can see we're all over the state, and we continue with every webinar to add some to the Padlet. So continue to do that. I'll give you just a second here to figure out how to do the Padlet. Just click on the plus sign and then drop it where you are, and you'll be added to our map for future webinars. All right, well, I'll let you navigate that, and we're going to move into some time where you get a chance to meet your colleagues. And this is one of my favorite times of this. Part of our goals is to sort of network together and get to know other district leaders and representatives out there. So we're going to take some time, about 5 minutes. You're going to be in a breakout room with 3, 4, maybe 5 people. You're going to share your name, where you're calling in from, your organization, and what your role is. And then where you're located, and then what are you doing to support climate education? Again, we'll take about 5 minutes. These questions, I think, are posted in your breakout room. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms right now, and then we'll bring you back, tell you a little bit more about today, and then jump into our presentation. I'm going to stay here, Amy.
Am I the only person here?
We'll put you into a breakout room.
No.
Sorry.
That's
Did it invite you to one?
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
and as far as the monarchs go, hopefully they're not as negatively affected as we will think because of the way the weather has been this year, but hopefully we'll continue to see a steady monarch rate for next year.
That's good news. All right, well, we're going to jump right back into the presentation. If you haven't already, if you could mute yourself, unless you're giving a comment, and we're going to jump back into our presentation. And we have members still joining us. And you're taping, Amy? Got it. And Nate, you've got the slides? All right, well, as Nate brings up our slides, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. We're the California Environmental Literacy Initiative Group. We are the District Innovation Hub. We are one of 7 hubs that work within Cali, coming together from across the state to support this critical work, really from a variety of angles. And you can see some of the hubs right there. Next slide, please. These are some of the goals that we have as the District Innovation Hub, and we are always looking for districts who are interested in this work that would like to talk to us about how they might support this work or benefit from this work. But again, you can read some of our goals. We are about building community, sharing resources, planning, and today you're going to see we're all about looking for those leading edge exemplars like Fremont, and then sharing those district support. So you're going to see that in action today. Next. So we look at this work through a systems approach. There are lots of systems approaches out there, and you can see some of them listed here that you're probably familiar with some of them. The one that most of you probably know about is the Green Ribbon Schools. They look at 3 different pillars, which is the way they base their systems. So they're looking at environmental impacts, health and wellness, and environmental literacy as their 3 things. We also share on this slide the systems approach from my organization, the Green Schools National Network, which looks at 4 different systems: leadership, curriculum instruction, facilities and operations, and climate and culture. And then just to show you that there's some really good networks within the state, this is the San Mateo systems approach, where they take campus, curriculum, community, and culture and look at this work too. So we believe systems are the way to address this work, and you're going to see some of that represented, I think, today in the talk. Next. All right. Throughout the day, you're going to have questions. You're going to want to say, oh, I wish we could hear more about that. So we have a Jamboard. It is in your chat right now. And if you have a question about anything based on what you're hearing today, go into the Jamboard and throw a question down. At the very end, we're going to go there. We're going to try to answer those questions. And you can do it specific to the topics there, or just really any question, and we will make sure that we try to address those. And if we don't get to them today, we will maybe get back to you somehow. Anyway, that is what we are all about. And now we are going to hear what Fremont Unified is all about. So with that, I would like to introduce my co-host, or my co-chair of the District Innovation Hub, Nate Ivey.
Great. Thanks so much, Tim, and welcome everybody. You know, I know that maybe some of you had signed up initially for LA Unified's presentation on taking equity to scale. They had a last-minute conflict, and they're going to bring that session back at a future time. So we're really happy today to be able to tell the story of Fremont Unified School District, where I work as an instructional coach. And I'm joined by Shreya Ramachandran, an alum of our district, Rishi Gurjar, a current student, and Sarah Ranney from the Sierra Club, to kind of talk about some of the initiatives trying to develop a comprehensive climate change education for our district. So our agenda at a glance, we'll share some context, a brief history of EE in California and in Fremont Unified School District. Then we'll move into the story of the student advocacy that happened in our district that really helped move this effort forward. And kind of wrap that up with the then what. So, you know, students did a whole bunch of advocacy, and how did the district respond, and what has Fremont done in response to that advocacy? And then, as Tim mentioned, at the end of the webinar, there'll be time for some breakout rooms if people have some deeper questions. So just a little bit of context for Fremont. Fremont's the 23rd largest district in the state. We serve about 33,000 students. It's a very diverse district. Our largest ethnic group is Asian students, and within that Asian community, there is a huge and diverse group of students from all over Asia. We have 5 comprehensive high schools, 5 junior high middle schools, and 29 elementaries. We're located at the south end of the Bay, kind of on the edge of Silicon Valley, and Fremont as a community has really embraced green tech, clean tech, advanced manufacturing. You probably have heard of Tesla. The factory is right here in our community. We also have a lot of advanced solar facilities, LED manufacturers, energy conservation groups, and other kind of clean tech, advanced tech stuff that to some degree informs the priorities of our community. Fremont as a district has had pockets of excellence, but has lacked a comprehensive environmental education plan. Some examples, in 2009, one of our schools was named America's Greenest School. This was before the Green Ribbon Schools program. one of our schools has a green career academy. One of the largest clubs in our district is at American High School with over 250 students in an environmental club. So there's just these amazing pockets of excellence that we've had for a long time. I think as a district, we've kind of gone and pat ourselves on the back, oh, we've got these good things going on, but we hadn't really been mindful of what's the system look like? How do we guarantee and ensure equity? How do we make sure that all students have opportunities? And today is going to help tell that story of how we're trying to address that challenge. So just a kind of a brief timeline of EE in California and in our district that I think sets some context. And, you know, I want to call back to 1970 and the first Earth Day, which really called attention to some of the challenges. You know, our Earth Day is coming up on the 53rd occurrence on Saturday. And it really drew attention to the environmental challenges of the planet. In 1972, the UN called for environmental education around the world to help address environmental challenges. And in 1976, California put into Ed Code that schools needed to accurately represent humanity's place in the ecological systems and the necessity for protecting our environment. So California has this long history, and I want to just highlight one law that was passed in 2003 that I think has had an enormous impact and kind of frames where we are now. And that was AB 1548, which was the Education in the Environment Initiative. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the EEI initiative from the curriculum that was published, you know, units in all the grade levels in science and history to help students learn about the environment. The other part of EEI that I think has kind of an even more fundamental impact was the legislation called for every time there was an update to standards in California, educational frameworks in California, that we needed to look for opportunities to include environmental principles and concepts. And we started to see that, especially as new frameworks were rolling out. So a good example of this is the prior science standards didn't have a lot of direct calls for environmental education. And if you were a science teacher and you were doing environmental stuff under the prior standards, you were kind of getting away with something. And now with the 2016 science framework, it's impossible to teach science without every year tackling and addressing environmental principles and concepts. And that's true now in history, social science, true in health. And as each framework gets updated, we're seeing those calls to include environmental principles and concepts. Then we're seeing the publishers respond by including those in the materials they publish. So the result of that right now is, I think we're in a situation where we have this amazing set of puzzle pieces that are kind of spilled out. So, you know, one publisher puts it in this way, another publisher puts it in that way. Science covers it here, history covers it there, but it's maybe not all the pieces put together. And we've been taking a look at that in our district. So we have all these puzzle pieces spilled out, and we hadn't really yet, until this year, started trying to figure out how do they all fit together and how do they all add up. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're trying to do that in our district. I want to jump to a piece of student advocacy that happened in the 2018-2019 school year, kind of in advance of the story we're going to tell today, but it sets a good context. Students called for a commitment to climate change action. And thinking of a school districts typically have a business services side that, you know, keeps the lights on, makes sure the schools are clean, provides the meals, runs the transportation, an educational services division, which is responsible for teaching and learning, in a human resources division. So this resolution was really about the business services. What could the district do to reduce its environmental impact was the challenge of this resolution that students organized. And there's been some really good progress from that resolution. Students passed another resolution. These were middle school students, passed a resolution calling for the district to become a zero waste to landfill entity. We have our district's recycling coordinator, Stephanie Willits, is on the call today, and a number of things have been happening to support that resolution. We've eliminated spork packets. We've put out utensil dispensers instead. We've got rid of condiment packages and instead have condiment dispensers. And on Monday this week, we launched a reusables pilot at one of our elementary schools, moving from disposable trays to reusable, washable metal trays and utensils. So that's the first of 5 schools that are going to run this spring, and we're looking to take that district-wide next year. Another example of reducing our impact is fleet electrification. Currently, 11 out of the 20 large school buses in our district are electric. By the beginning of next year, all of the large buses should be electric. They all have the capacity for bi-directional charging, so we can return energy to the grid. And our Transportation Services Division is looking at the electrification of our small buses and what we call our white fleet, which is our maintenance trucks, our delivery vehicles, and also our landscaping tools. So trying to think of how we can move from gas-powered small engine devices to electric. So they're building out the charging capacity for that. And then finally, our district is finally wrapping its mind around solar. There was a little bit of a pressure to get in under the current net energy metering agreement, and our board signed an agreement in December that will cover about 72% of our district's use, and it'll also include energy storage, so batteries to mitigate against peak energy costs, and also to potentially provide microgridded resilience hubs in the event of a power shutoff, where schools could be a place where power, air conditioning, and other services are provided. But the thing that we really want to talk about today is the students organizing for an educational response to the climate emergency. And to help us do that, I want to invite our panel of speakers to tell us a little bit about themselves. We've assembled people who are directly involved with this: Rishi Gurjar, Sarah Ranney, and Shreya Ramachandran. And so I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, their name, their role, and at this point, just how and why did you become environmentally motivated? And then in our next set of questions, we'll go into how did you get involved and advance this, this cause. So Rishi, maybe we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your role is, and how you got plugged in and fired up, and how and why you became environmentally motivated.
Hello, I'm Rishi. I'm a senior at American High School in Fremont. I got involved in this space like in sophomore year during the pandemic. I noticed that a lot of my friends were experiencing climate anxiety because during the pandemic there on YouTube and on news there was a lot of climate information, both like pundits talking about like the danger of climate change, and then also other pundits talking about how climate change is a hoax and how everything is fake. So there was a lot of misinformation in the space, and for students our age, it was kind of concerning because just a year before that, there were really threatening wildfires in our area, and there was a lot of smoke in the air. And I remembered like how I would be like biking through the smoke and how school was canceled for weeks and weeks during that time. So it was clear that like there was something going on in the environment, but we didn't know what was real and what was fake. And to kind of like bring my mind into like a space where I could handle that, I began gardening because I was away from school. Like all my friends and we were just at home taking online classes. So the garden, or my garden, it kind of became like a respite for me where I could relax. And I began gardening, and I turned my garden, which was very bland and it was just like a concrete jungle, into something that was actually green and something that I could actually use to like breathe in clean air and I could actually relax in. And that's when I joined Shreya's movement. There was a small group of students that were pushing climate literacy in our district because we noticed that our district wasn't doing enough to teach climate change to students, not only in the sciences, but also in the humanities and across all of the grade levels. So we'll be talking about the exact story of how we assembled later on, but that initial climate anxiety and seeing all of my friends deal with the same thing is what motivated me to take some action and to see and to kind of like push our district into doing more to help support students.
Great. Thanks so much, Rishi. I'd like to turn to Sarah Ranney to give her a chance to introduce herself and how she became motivated, her how and why she got connected to being environmentally motivated.
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, my name is Sarah Ranney. I live in Berkeley. I have two kids who are 9 and 11, and I work full-time for a marketing technology company. And I did back in 2016 as well. when I stumbled upon the first meeting of the Sierra Club Climate Literacy Committee, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But one thing about me is I graduated 20 years ago with a degree in environmental studies, and I sort of lived with that knowledge, a lot of the interdisciplinary work that we really want kids to understand about how everything connects. I had in college, and I sort of went on to this conventional career path, but it was sort of sitting as a seed that hadn't been activated. And frankly, as 2016 sort of transpired, I realized that with kids who were young and with the fears I had about our future, I really needed to get involved. And that's when I started getting involved in climate literacy work. And it's been meeting youth and seeing how they can catalyze action that has kept me in it in all these years.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I'm so glad you were able to join us today. And our last panelist is Shreya Ramachandran. So Shreya, tell us about yourself, your connection to this work, and how you became environmentally motivated.
Thank you, Nate. Yeah, my name is Shreya. I'm an alumna of FUSD, and I'm currently a sophomore at Stanford studying biology and environmental policy. And I've really been involved in the climate space since middle school. And I really approached it from the lens of water scarcity and drought. So at the peak of California's drought several years ago when I was in middle school, I visited the county of Tulare for an archery competition. And there I really saw the crippling effects of drought, people's wells running dry, leaving them completely waterless. They had to truck water in for even basic needs like drinking and bathing. And that was just heartbreaking to see, and the knowledge that this was happening so close to home, like in our home state. But it was also understanding that this was not just a regional issue, but a global issue. When I visited my grandparents in India not long after that, I saw a very similar scene play out. I saw people struggling due to lack of access to clean water in a very similar way. And so when I got back home, I really knew I wanted to do something about this. So I started trying to take action, do just water conservation in my own home. And I learned about gray water, which is, if people don't know, lightly used water from sinks, showers, baths, laundries that can be reused for non-potable uses. And up to 60% of the used water in our home is gray water, and it can be reused. So I did several years worth of research to make sure that gray water reuse was safe. And when I started talking to people about this solution that could be so useful, I found that most people didn't know about gray water, or they didn't know about the importance of water conservation and how drought is an issue that is going to become more and more common with climate change. So I founded an NGO called the Gray Water Project, focused on water conservation and promoting gray water reuse. And since then, I've become more and more involved in the climate space, not just focused on water, but also understanding how climate impacts are going to be really vast and varied, leading to more extreme weather patterns, drought and flooding, but also a variety of other issues. So for me, I really care deeply about climate literacy because as a young person myself, like I really believe in the power of youth to make a change, and you can't take action if you don't know what the problem is. So that's why I really think that this is something that should be on the forefront of the climate movement.
Great. Thank you, Shreya, and thanks, Rishi and Sarah as well. Really appreciate hearing your why for this work. So let's get into the what. Students in Fremont passed a resolution calling for an educational response to the climate emergency. So I'm hoping Sarah, Shreya and Rishi, you guys can tell us that story, and Sarah, feel free to pitch in as you see fit. But Shreya, let's start with you. Can you tell us the story of why and how you organized this effort?
Yeah, for sure. And feel free to jump in if and when I miss things, guys. But the way I learned about climate literacy initially was because Sarah actually reached out to folks at Fremont, and I'm the Youth Sustainability Commissioner in Fremont. And I learned about the work that students in Oakland had actually recently done to pass a climate literacy resolution there. So the first step for me was really to reach out and pull together students from across FUSD who were also interested in being student leaders for this effort. And Rishi was one of the first people who was super excited about being involved. And there were other students from all across the high schools in FUSD. So we pulled in students who we knew were already interested in environmental action through their participation in environmental clubs. And we very quickly formed a core group and a number of students who were loosely involved as well. And we had a little bit of a leg up because we already had some draft language from the Sierra Club and from the group of students in Oakland. But the first thing we all sat together and did was really make the language of this board resolution specific to Fremont. Because as Nate mentioned, Fremont already had a commitment to climate action, and there's a lot of specific work that's already been done in the district, such as FIERCE, which is our inter-high school environmental group, local nonprofits, and other organizations that are really doing great work for the environment, demonstrating how people in Fremont really want this to happen. So the first thing we did was really specify that draft language for our local community. And then we started talking to people. We started talking to teachers in our district to learn what is already being taught. And we found what we were kind of expecting, which is that there are some groups and some teachers that are really going above and beyond to make this happen, but it's not widespread and it's not as common as we would have liked. So we spoke to teachers. We also collected a bunch of feedback through a Google form that we sent out to just learn what teachers are already doing and what they're already teaching. And when we were very certain that this was something that was a pressing need in our community and something we definitely wanted to move forward with, we started to get support from basically every group that we possibly could. We reached out to the teachers union to see if they would be willing to support our resolution. We got dozens of letters of support from environmental organizations, local community organizations, and just prominent members of the community that we reached out to and talked to, told them about what we were trying to accomplish, and they were super excited to support us. We wrote a draft letter for people who weren't really sure where to start with writing a letter of support to just make the process easier. And once we had that and we were all ready to go, we held a preparation session to, once this actually goes to the Board of Ed, you have an opportunity for community members to give public comment on the resolution. So we held a session, several sessions actually, to teach people like, okay, this is how you give public comment, this is when our thing is going to be, and just get them, help them understand what that process is going to look like. So, and we also sent out a petition that got over 300 supporters. So we did all of this pre-work before going to the Board of Education. And we actually mobilized, I think, 30 to 40 people to show up and give public comment and support. And it passed unanimously with our board. So that was very, very exciting. And I'm summarizing this all very quickly, like it was totally a breeze, but it was actually like 8 months over the course of doing all of this, and near weekly meetings and working with a large number of very dedicated people. And I also want to highlight that this was a student-led effort, but we also had significant support from Sarah and also from Ernesto and Scott Lewis, who came to our meetings and guided us through this process. So their support and dedication was really essential to making this happen as well.
Great, thanks, Shreya. Rishi and Sarah, is there anything you'd like to add to kind of the story of how this came about? And then we'll take a look at a little bit of what's in the resolution itself.
Yeah, Shreya did a great summary of all of that. I just wanted to add one thing and highlight that, which was the pockets of excellence that kind of like we were able to leverage within this resolution, like all across the district. And this is true for every district, even your districts back in your areas. There's many students and teachers all across like every single grade level and every single school that are motivated to take action for the environment, both within their school district and beyond. And many students are really like pushing to get like more educated on environmental issues and on climate change within schools, but they just don't know how to act, or they don't know like where other students that are like-minded are. So within our efforts, we were able to identify those pockets of excellence and those the different like teachers, faculty members across the district that were really pushing the school forward from an environmental perspective. And we were also able to identify students that were very motivated to take action environmentally and then gather a coalition and take action. So within your own districts, if you guys are able to identify those pockets of excellence and those pockets of interest, these kind of resolutions are very feasible, depending on the location. but it really just takes a large coalition of both parents and educators and faculty members, as well as really motivated students at the district level.
Great. Thanks, Rishi. Let's take a look at a couple of highlights from the resolution. So, the resolution, like many resolutions, has a whole bunch of whereases and then a therefore it be resolved. And Shreya, Rishi, maybe could you guys speak to the goals? Like, what were you really hoping to accomplish? What are some of the key therefore be it resolved that you were really excited about to see pass in this resolution?
I think one of the big things was implementation. Like previously, we saw that a lot of resolutions were passed by students, and we saw this happen in other districts as well. But because of different reasons, from budgeting to organization, the district was not able to take action. So a big priority within the writing of our resolution was making it very easy for the district to take action. So in that bottom bubble, you can see create an implementation plan. And that was one of our core highlights, where we wanted the district to really take action as soon as possible and make it really easy for the district to do that by delegating the responsibility to a department to facilitate the creation and implementation of climate literacy.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a really good one. For me, I think one of my main ones was really the time is of the essence, because there's a lot of things that at a district level move slowly but surely, and this is not something that can be postponed 5 to 10 years. But also the concept of graduating climate literate. Instead of having environmental education just be something that is sort of slotted in for a couple of weeks at one point in a student's education, have it be a concept that is slowly developed and built up over time, over several grade levels, was also something that was really important.
Great. Thanks, both of you, for that. We're going to talk a little bit in a minute about how our district has responded, but I want to give some time to Sarah from Sierra Club to talk through just the kind of support that Sierra Club has available for this and kind of the Sierra Club's motivation for supporting students in this effort. So Sarah?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so just a couple take a step back slides. The Climate Literacy Committee was formed in 2016 by 2 longtime Sierra Club volunteers, Rebecca Franke and Kathy Durbin. And it was created to try to put into practice this commitment that the Sierra Club California made in 2016. They wanted all students in California to graduate climate literate. And the Sierra Club isn't usually in the business, I guess, of working within education policy, of working with students, but they put this sort of proclamation out, the Sierra Club California. They said, we want all students in California to graduate climate literate. And we believe that means that a student should know the causes of climate change, its potential for harm, what is required to avoid worsening effects, what actions need to be taken to ensure a livable future, and keep people and institutions involved in these actions. So those words to me feel formal. They feel a little bit dated at this point, but there's some really important truths in there or kind of grains that we've kept with us in terms of solutions focused, multidisciplinary, not just the science, but really what actions can we take, and that a lot of these are decisions that people make, and getting closer to the policy and getting closer to decision makers is a really important thing we want kids to understand. So I happened to join the first meeting of that committee. And if we go to the next slide, pretty quickly as a committee, we felt that focusing on districts as a unit of change was going to be sort of our theory. Like, maybe this will work. We don't really know what we're doing. We were a gathering of activists, organizers, teachers. I work in marketing. We were all coming together and thinking, how do we bring this to life? And we decided school districts seemed like a good, not too big, not too small, maybe just right. And it took years really to get off the ground into what this really looked like. But in 2019, as Shreya mentioned, Oakland was the first district in California to pass a climate literacy resolution. It also included an implementation commitment. And that work is being carried out by Otaka today, and it's really remains a really impressive and wonderful example of climate literacy in action. Fremont was the second. And one thing I wanted to call out, Shreya, that you didn't mention was it all happened in the depths of the pandemic. So our first meeting was maybe late October of 2020, and the resolution was passed in May of 2021. One of the really impressive things that you did as a group of student leaders was bring people together over Zoom, over Slack, without ever having a chance to meet and organize in person. So you were the second in the state. Berkeley, which is where I lived, and I helped to bring about the resolution with mostly help from student leaders and teachers in Berkeley in 2021, and then LAUSD. I know we'll hear from them in a future meeting, but they were the fourth in 2022. So that district idea has been working pretty well. We have many more that we want to help with, but what keeps us going as this little committee of volunteers is that we see that it seems to matter. Like, it seems to matter to help districts put some center of gravity and some commitments around climate literacy, and it brings people with common interests together. But if we go to the next slide, there's a few reasons that I really feel this is so important to keep at the center of our work. The first is that I think probably this is a group that understands this. Climate change and climate action is not consistently taught. Most teachers don't talk about it in the classroom, but most parents wish they would. And most teachers feel like they can't because they don't know it well enough. So there's a professional development block here. The second thing is that when students know about climate change and about the actions and solutions that they can take to change it, it actually changes behavior long-term. There was a study done, it was on a college level class, but it showed a sustained reduction in CO2 emissions on an individual level from people who had graduated from that class. The third thing is it impacts, and I should say it improves mental health and civic trust when a student is exposed to what's going on in the world and kind of brings that into the classroom, and then the classroom becomes a place where that can be discussed and helped to be digested, and then focused on solutions and ways that we might help things become better. It is a virtuous cycle that is really important, not just for academic reasons, but for the whole self, the whole student. And there's a study here in the Lancet that showed that that not talking about climate change is eroding students' sense of well-being and trust in government and sort of the civic state. And then the last one, and this is a picture I'm really quite proud of. This is a group of 60 students who traveled to DC last month. Rishi somehow is right in the middle, but it's going to be hard to see from this picture. This group of students went to lobby on Capitol Hill for a national climate education resolution that Barbara Lee from my district introduced last month. But the reason I put this picture here is because today's youth are tomorrow's voters, workers, and leaders. And I think that's where the Sierra Club's commitment really remains really strong, is that we recognize that helping students understand the climate reality is going to make more informed citizens for the rest of their lives. So I think I've taken too much time, but a few points here, and this echoes a bit what Shreya talked about in the implementation or in the resolution passage. We really feel like a district approach has worked well, and that there's some real important guiding principles for it. So the first one is let students lead, give students a framework for action, but student engagement and momentum has really been the catalyst for every success we've had. The second is to build a broad coalition. Change should happen within a district, not to a district. So that needs to come from the people who are impacted and who have a say. You need to bring everyone to the table. The third is kind of related, but find out what good work is already happening and connect to it, because that's been such a validating part of this process. Is there's no question pockets of really good work anywhere in the country, and finding ways to bring those together can be really amplifying. The fourth is support teachers, and that means pay them, because it's not just, you can't just like snap your fingers and all of a sudden bring a comprehensive climate thing into the classroom. We're not talking about one specific set of curriculum. We're not talking about a specific textbook. We're talking about integrating this in a natural way. That takes time to do well. And then the last one is to stay student-centered, multidisciplinary, age-appropriate, and solutions-focused.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. Thanks for sharing that. And I imagine if people are interested in contacting the Sierra Club and figuring out how to get support for this, you'd be happy to help connect them to those resources. So what we'd like to do in the next part is spend a little bit of time quickly running through some of the actions and responses that happened in Fremont Unified School District as a result of this resolution. And honestly, I had been waiting for a resolution like this for so long. I think our district had been resting on its laurels of having these pockets of excellence and letting itself off the hook on having a systemic approach. So this resolution, when it was passed by the board, the next day I'm like, all right, let's go, let's do this. I think there has to be somebody waiting and ready to take a resolution, because the resolution is different than a policy, and put it into action. I will say also that, when the resolution was passed, then Shreya graduated and moved on, but she was always in our inbox trying to find out what we were doing, how she could help move this forward. But luckily, we also still had Rishi as a student who was able to join in the effort to move it forward. So we'll talk about kind of the 2 years that followed, last year and what we did to move forward, and then this year where we're at now. And Rishi has participated in a district-wide committee called CLEAN. We call it our Climate Literacy and Environmental Education Network, really acknowledging that that climate literacy needs to incorporate environmental education, especially for younger students, to set the foundation for the difficult and challenging work of climate literacy. So in our first year, we formed a committee, paid, Sarah. We found money. The resolution helped us knock loose some money in our curriculum and instruction department to stipend 3 teachers from elementary, middle, and high school, to gather 5 students and to gather some community partners to create a vision for what we wanted this to look like, and to outline kind of a roadmap or a plan for getting the work done. And one of our first steps was to establish some values. And Rishi, you want to talk through the values and the process for establishing them real quick?
Definitely. Yeah. So the first value is action-oriented, and that means that climate education should not only provide information, but also encourage students to take action towards addressing climate change. And we thought this was one of the most important things, because when we hit 2050, which is like when the IPCC has many of its standards set to, like Shreya and I are going to be around 45 years old. So that's when like the temperatures will be really high, and that's when there's going to be extreme weather events. So action really needs to be taken now, and it's important to empower students to take that. And then equity is also important, because regardless of students' race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, geographic location, etc., everyone is affected by climate change in unique ways. So it's important that everyone has access to that education and the resources. And then integration is also important, because it should incorporate various subjects and fields of study, including science, social studies, economics, politics, etc. And this interdisciplinary approach allows for a more comprehensive understanding of the complexity around climate change. And age appropriateness is also very important, because we don't want to be approaching kindergartners and telling them the world is dying, because that would really scare them. And we don't want to be approaching seniors in high school and telling them very broad and generalized information that's not really specific and not really data backed. So we want to make sure that it's presented in a way that's understandable and engaging for people of all ages. And then culturally proficient is also important, because there's many perspectives to climate change, and it's important to be sensitive and respectful of the different cultural perspectives and practices, and recognizing that there's different cultures that have unique relationships with the natural world, and incorporating those perspectives and those knowledge systems directly into the curricula. So these were the different values that we thought climate literacy in FUSD should have, and we did iterate on these as we went into Clean 2.0.
And I think, we started with values as a really important thing. So the resolution calls for us to define climate literacy, to develop an implementation plan. But we felt it was important to start with values so that every time we come to a decision point, we can look to our values and say, okay, does this decision that we're making align with the values that we hold? After the values, we worked on a vision. And the way we did that is we gathered everybody on Zoom. We had people contribute all of their ideas about what a beautiful future would look like. And if this was working perfectly, what would it look like? And the group generated over 200 ideas, and they were all over the place. So we, printed them out, cut them up on paper, organized them into 5 main groups, and really started to think about, well, which ones belong to curriculum and instruction, which ones belong to teaching and learning. So there were some that don't. Environmental leadership and action is a shared responsibility, is a value that informs what the broader district needs to do. Well-maintained campuses that minimize climate impacts and help students connect to nature is our second part of the vision. We want to make sure we have equity-focused partnerships that bring in community partners to best serve our students. But the heart of where the work is going with the curriculum and instruction and teaching and learning is that age-appropriate and culturally proficient TK to 12 climate literacy and environmental education in the sciences and humanities informs, educates, and empowers all FUSC students to be civically engaged, action-oriented environmental problem solvers. So that's really become our mission statement for what we're trying as a group to achieve in this work. And then finally, the work is hard, it's isolating, and it's really important to share successes, celebrate successes, and share best practices. One of the committee members that we were really lucky to have join our group is our district's public information officer. So our ability to tell the story and start to make it feel like it's a whole district effort increased exponentially, and I'll highlight a couple of ways that happened. We broke those parts of the vision into an action plan, saying if we do these things, then our vision will thrive and we'll achieve our goals. And at the end of year 1, which was last year, we had some pretty strong successes. The PIO, our public information officer, published monthly eco-friendly news stories to our community. When we share the deck, all of these are linked, so you can click on and get to those. We developed an environmentally themed summer school with an action project at each grade level, and each reading aligned to it, and a number of other things that are shared here. So that kind of wrapped up last year. Moving into this year, we realized, and we were planning for that, we needed to do the work of defining what it means to be climate literate, and that we needed to create that implementation plan TK to 12. So this year we assembled and stipended 2 teachers from each grade, TK to 12, one representing a humanities point of view, one representing a science point of view, and a high school student from each of our attendance areas. We've been keeping the resolution in mind and have worked this year to create a draft climate literacy definition, which is kind of a mashup of the Sierra Club's definition and the essential principles for climate literacy, which is open for revision. So one of the things that we found missing in both of those was the social emotional challenges that are present in this work, but also the social emotional benefits of the connections to nature and doing good work. So we want to understand the principles. We want to access and apply good information. We need students to be able to navigate the social emotional challenges, to be able to communicate about climate and climate change, and then to take action. I know we're running short on time, so just the way we're approaching this work is we're having the teams of teachers work on creating a draft grade level guide. We started by looking at the capacities of students at different grades, investigating the curriculum to see what's already present, thinking of the social emotional considerations and the fears and hopes that students have about the environment at different ages, mapping out our community resources, all with the goal of identifying a grade level theme and an outline for action projects that students can take each year. Our hope is that by examining the existing curriculum, identifying grade level themes, and doing this other work, we can create these action projects. So some early successes that we found in here. An example, our existing curriculum at 6th grade is the first time in science where students get a formal introduction to climate change. And it's also in our history curriculum, a place where students start to see the impacts of climate on civilizations throughout history. On connecting to nature, we had the groups map out their campuses, their neighborhoods, and their community to see about nearby opportunities to connect to nature. We had people map out the excitement and joy that students find connecting to nature, but also their fears and concerns. So thinking of little kids, their fear and concerns about bugs, maybe. Rishi mentioned the fires, and a lot of people experience that smoke and have anxiety about that. But our older students are really getting this climate anxiety about kind of the fear of the future. And we want to pair that with some environmental responsibilities that students can take at home, on campus, and in the community, but also action projects at each grade level that help add up to a climate literate graduate. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tim to kind of facilitate the next portion and close us out. So Tim.
All right. And so thank you so much to the Fremont team. Really thoughtful work. I love how you involve students throughout the whole process and really have been systematic about how we look at this work and make sure we're not leaving anybody or anything behind. So great job, Fremont. We got a couple of questions. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I want to make sure that Amy has some time to close out as well. One of the questions, and there's some nice comments in here too, so I hope the Fremont team takes a look at this, but one of the questions about number of schools. I think you have 50 schools in the district, as I recall.
And we have 42 campuses.
Okay, it's a good sized district, so lots happening there. I think the funding on the electric vehicles could probably be a whole nother webinar, but we know there are some grants out there. We know that both at the federal and state level, there are some places there, and you can probably talk to Nate directly about that. I thought this was an interesting question, the idea of how do you get unions on board? And, you know, they're one of our stakeholder groups. Is there any comment on that? How do you get them to be?
Trey, I'm going to turn that one over to you because I know you did the outreach to FUDTA about that. So can you talk through how that went and what response you got?
Yeah, I think for all of this in general, it's sort of just reaching out and seeing if someone would be willing to talk to you. So I sort of approached it in the same way that I approached reaching out to any other environmental group or community group. We sent them an email and we were like, hey, we have this thing that we're working on. We would really love your support because we know that you are representative of teachers and you're really well respected. And we would love to set up a time to chat with you. So, I mean, we were lucky that it went quite well, that there were people that were maybe not able to support in terms of time or resources, but were able to say, hey, if you put this together and if you get this passed, we'll back you up. And it doesn't always go as well. We've had a lot of conversations with groups that have basically said, we think the work that you're doing is important and valuable, but unfortunately, we will not be able to provide you an official endorsement at this time. And that's okay too, because every single person you talk to, you're getting the word out a little bit more. So there's benefit even if you don't get the end result that you want in that particular case.
And I think we all heard through the presentation too, that teachers were not just respected through this process, but were also actively engaged in the process. So, so we have some other great questions there, but I'm going to defer those to our follow-up session. So I hope some of you stick around and ask those questions of our Fremont team and of the Sarah from the Sierra Club and our student leaders. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amy to take us home here.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for being here. It's great to see so many familiar faces and a couple of new ones. I've put a few things in the chat for you. Let me just hit send on that. One is Rishi's amazing article that he just wrote and came out a couple of weeks ago at Tensions, which really describes this process at Fremont Unified. So check that one out. Next slide. Also, there's a link to feedback and suggestions for this webinar. We're starting to think about our webinar series for next fall. And if there are different topics or presenters or ways you'd like us to bring a district focus group together, please let us know there. Next slide. A different innovation hub at Cali, the Green Career Innovation Hub, is trying to locate educators who are working on green and blue careers. So if you happen to know anyone who's doing good or great work, or just really wants to do great work in that field, please have them fill out this survey. Or if that is you, then please do fill it out. And that includes all kind of green careers around, climate advocacy, public policy, public health. It doesn't just need to be in the STEM field. Great. Next slide. I wanted to make sure, especially for those community-based partner members that are here with us today, that Cali is launching a new and improved partner portal where educators will be able to connect with community-based partners, searchable by region, topic, standard, program type, fee structure, all sorts of things. So please help spread the word about that. And lastly, please make sure to come and spread the word about our 2 remaining webinars for this series, one on May 18th and one on June 15th, featuring Porterville and Cabrillo Unified School Districts. That's it, except to
All
say
right.
that we have, take us to the breakout rooms.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. We have our next section is optional if you'd like to join us. This is a time to actually get up close and personal with our presenters today and share your information and stories, or to ask deeper questions. We have 2 breakout rooms, I think, set up right now. We have one on student leadership. So how do we get students involved here? And I know some of our students talked about getting interested in this at a younger age than high school. And what does that look like? And how do we organize? And you saw some examples of this. You may have something to share there. The other is around district planning. And so how do districts do this work? And we've got some great examples here today. Nate can share more in terms of what Fremont has done. And I know, looking at the audience list, there are some out there that also have stories to share. So if you'd like to join us, we're going to put some breakout rooms open right now, and step on in. And this will only go for about a half an hour. Thank you again to everyone.